up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is Ep84.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite movies and the deeper meaning within those movies. And this episode is going to be a very special episode. Once again, we are not talking about a director, Ep84.
I know. What's going on, man?
We're going to talk about a general movie topic, which is a good thing.
Yeah, sometimes.
We're going to talk about action films and martial arts films. I kind of want to lean towards modern era, but we're also going to get a little bit into the history of it. The reason why we're doing this RB3 is because I had the pleasure of watching John Wick 3 with you last week.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Opening
well.
night.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure because your enjoyment of the film is expressed vocally.
Yeah, through laughter.
Through laughter.
Yeah.
And through joy, because that is what John Wick delivers. Loads of laughs for all the family.
It was just crazy, man.
It was crazy.
It's an extreme amount of action.
Yeah.
I think it kind of teeters the line of maybe being too much action. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever said that. I don't know if I've ever said that for a movie before, but that's a lot of action.
But it kind of got me thinking after the movie we were talking about it. And it kind of got me thinking about modern action movies and action movies in general and what they represent. And then it also kind of got me thinking about martial arts movies and what they're all about. And I told you, RB3, that I was raised on martial arts movies. I was raised on Bruce Lee. I was raised on Enter the Dragon, Game of Death, all these movies that really brought in a new era. It's the 70s era of martial arts films and kung fu films. And the reason why I was raised on it is because of my brother. Now, my brother, I've talked about him a little bit on the podcast, also works in films, and he works with 8711, which is the stunt company that produces the John Wick movies and also produces a couple other movies as well, like Atomic Blonde. They did the stunts for that.
Blonde's amazing.
They did the stunts for a couple other movies. I forget which ones off the top of my head, but they're pretty big. And I reached out to my brother. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. He did tell me, however, that if I ever want one of the 8711 guys, they can come on too.
Oh, that'd be dope. Yeah,
he's like,
amazing.
oh, dude, I'm friends with him. If you want to bring him on the podcast, I can hook you up.
You know what? I recently stumbled across this book called Stuntman or whatever. It's written by one of the original Indiana Jones stuntmen. I think if one day we could take a different look at the action perspective and kind of break it down through stunts, and maybe we have a good time.
My brother knows, and I personally know, I'm friends with him, a ton of stuntmen that work in Hollywood and that work in the movies, in the industry, that work on they literally live off this stuff.
Yeah.
I know I'm friends with quite a few of them, so I would love to have them on and see their perspective and their point of view. And stunt choreographers, I know a few of them as well. But that's also because my brother works. This is what he does. He works with a stunt company. He works hand in hand with them. He has his own stunt company. And this is what he provides to movies, and this is his forte. So I personally have worked on stunts, have worked with stuntmen, have worked on martial arts films, short films or videos and stuff like that for YouTube because of my brother. My brother literally does this for a living. So I have a very acquired taste, RB3. I'm going to pull up my glasses and raise my nose up to the air on martial arts films and martial arts and fight scenes and choreography and what makes it cool and what makes it effective. Obviously not as good as my brother because he does that professionally. Yeah. But I personally have a very, very, very deep connection to martial arts, whether that be training in martial arts as I tried when I was younger, whether that be MMA, UFC, which I have also said that I've been following since I was 14, closely following to the point where I was going to train in Phoenix with MMA Lab and some other companies there that train in MMA. So fight scenes are my forte. This is what I do. I rank them. I talk about them. I did the best fight scenes in Star Wars with Ken on Force Center a while back.
Hey.
I've debated the best fight scenes ever with a couple of my friends.
MCU? Oh,
just fight scenes, best fight scenes in movies. This is what I do, RB3. I'm the cream of the crop. I wish my brother was here because he's a little bit, he has a different perspective than I do. We kind of debate back and forth. But I thought it was a perfect opportunity to talk about the martial arts movie and the action movie and what came before and what it is now and what are the best of the best, the cream of the crop when it comes to modern action films. So let's get right into it, RB3. Now, you told me beforehand that you've taken martial arts courses at USC Film School. So I kind of want to hear a little bit of the history of martial arts.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of it stems from China, a lot of it stems from Japan, but that Eastern perspective.
Yeah, well, it really is. A lot of people consider it kind of a mixture of Hong Kong cinema and Western cinema, right? Because it incorporates a lot of Western values in terms of like, it incorporates a lot of Eastern values in terms of like the cultures it represents, in terms of the messages that's getting across, and it originates from, that kind of culture in cinema originates from people like Kurosawa and like all these old samurai films. But then it mixes in Hong Kong cinema, which is a lot more about masculinity, which is a lot more about, about defining manliness. And Hong Kong cinema has an incredibly big crossover with American cinema, especially in the 70s. The connection between the action movie, it was kind of like what was happening in Hong Kong was directly influencing American cinema at that time as well. But so a lot of that came from the import of stars like Bruce Lee. I mean, Bruce Lee is kind of like the pinnacle of kung fu movies, martial arts movies. It was a genre that existed very largely in China and Japan before it came to the United States. But Bruce Lee is kind of the big crossover. And the reason it has such a crossover appeal is because, like I said, it's a mixture of Western values, and the Western values of revenge and the Western values of basically revenge fantasy that kind of is permeated throughout. A lot of people consider martial arts movies counterculture, right? Kind of consider it outside of the mainstream, especially in the 70s. So a lot of those exploitation films during that time, like blaxploitation, like the B, we talk a lot about when we did the Robert Rodriguez episodes, like the B movies, the Grindhouse movies, all about revenge fantasy. So that's
why there's a lot of martial arts in those movies.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. So but it kind of inhabits all of that. And they had a huge impact in the Black community. I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience. Like my grandmother, she grew up in like during that time period, 60s, 70s, and all that stuff. And she loves Bruce Lee. She loves right now. The only channel she basically watches the El Rey Network, which is the channel owned by Robert Rodriguez.
That's right.
Because daily they show like some throwback like 70s.
Yeah.
And
like, I could say the same thing about the reason why it's on El Rey Network is because that has a Latino effect too.
Yeah.
Like Latinos love martial arts films. And fight scenes and all that stuff.
Well, it's back in the 70s, it was the most popular genre amongst Black audiences because for one, it portrayed a non-white hero. So it offered an alternative to the mainstream, and same way that blaxploitation did for Black communities, at least. It offered a non-white hero and offered, again, revenge fantasy. So it kind of played into that counterculture, and which offers up a larger conversation about how the impact of revolutionary cinema kind of permeates and goes from being like the subgenre to the main genre, right? Because kung fu movies are also seen as like revolutionary. They're always about decolonization. They're always about fighting against like the establishment, fighting against the people who are holding you down, and it's about debunking colonization and empathizing with struggles to rise above.
Yeah.
That's a general theme through a lot of these movies. So it had a big connection for Black people and audiences in America.
And it's crazy to think that Hollywood proclaims itself obviously the king of movies, but this is an example of the power of foreign cinema being an import into the American audiences and how they fell in love with these Eastern movies with usually an Asian lead. Well,
especially during that time, in particular, foreign films were just seen as things to bury, and they're still seen as things to bury. But the biggest by far the biggest crossover has been martial arts cinema, even up until 2001 or 2002 or 2000 when Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out. That made over $200 million domestically, and it was one of the highest gross. I think it's still to this day the highest grossing foreign film, if I'm not mistaken. But again, it's because martial arts films inherently have that connection to both Black communities, to both Latino communities, like you mentioned, and to all these other communities.
And Asian,
Of course, Asian communities too. Yeah. But that's what really creeps. That's what has kept it above. So I think this portrayal of like masculinity coming from his influence of Hong Kong cinema, plus its depiction of a non-white hero, plus this kind of revolutionary style like appeal, like the revenge, the getting back at the man and getting back at the people, I think has such a big cultural resonance that it ended up creating a whole new kind of not subgenre but mainstream genre in cinema.
And influencing a lot of American directors.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of American movies ended up incorporating a lot of the skills of martial arts, especially Chuck Norris was directly trained by Bruce Lee, and Chuck Norris ended up becoming like the biggest, kind of the introduction into the 80s wave of action, at least. And then of course 80s was a weird time. So is now we're in a weird time where we're so like pro-American. So it kind of became like Americanized type shit.
Yeah.
But then, late 80s, early 90s is when we start to see Legend of the Drunken Master, and then Jackie Chan
blew up.
coming across the pond. So it was so with that martial arts cinema started becoming a facet in all genres of action, whether it was the explosion. Obviously war movies aside, but if it's like the bang up action, like Die Hard kind of represented like an older kind of era, but now everything is more like Rush Hour. Everything is more like what's some other popular 90s. Well, it all kind of came from what Kung Fu movies.
Yeah.
A lot of the 90s action movies.
A lot of it too.
A lot of it too comes from John Woo too. John Woo had that crossover. Because John Woo, again, he's a Hong Kong filmmaker. So he had a lot of the same themes that the original Kung Fu movies kind of had. So a lot of his movies kind of had that big crossover, and he ended up becoming an immensely popular, not just Hong Kong director, but American director as well.
And a lot of it too was during this period of time, whether it was after World War II, where a lot of Chinese immigrants were coming to America.
Yeah.
A lot of Chinese immigrants were coming to America, and a lot of foreign territories were now becoming a part of American culture, and a lot of it too comes from this fascination with the pitch of martial arts initially for someone who's never seen it before comes from the amazement, RB3, of seeing a guy move so fast and so efficiently that he becomes a human weapon, right? And
yeah.
It's that right there is the pitch to someone who's never seen martial arts as like, this is amazing. It's so cool because I've never seen a white dude basically move like this.
Right, and I even have a quote here from an article written by Todd Boyd, who's a USC professor, and he's quoting somebody else, so it's not a direct quote, but he says where one commentator he's referring to a documentary about Bruce Lee. One commentator goes as far as suggesting love for Lee runs so deep in the black community because his footwork bore the hallmarks of rhythm that ultimately had African roots. So like the way he moved is very different than per se like the James Bonds or that was the big action thing at that time was James Bond
yeah.
in the 1960s and 70s. But it was very different. It was very rhythmic. It was very kinetic, and people connect to kinetic energy very, 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 very much. I mean, that's obviously. While Kung Fu and martial arts movies had a very physical kinetic energy, a lot of the later on down the line, a lot of the action movies from John Woo had translated that kinetic energy into gunplay, right, into the shoot 'em ups, right, the very fast moving like type thing. And that's also another facet of action that spurred up. And I think John Wick is like the combination of the stunts and the martial arts, but also the gunplay aspect of it too. So
one thing I definitely want to talk about is the influence that this had. Obviously, a lot of it is Hong Kong films, martial arts, Kung Fu is much more Chinese-centered, is much more Hong Kong-centered. But there's also Akira Kurosawa, which is the samurai film, which influenced George Lucas. It influenced Star Wars. It basically gave him this idea. It gave a lot of filmmakers the idea of what's that movie called? With Seven Samurai?
Seven Samurai. But specifically, Star Wars references Forbidden Tower, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. But that's it's an example of this Japanese cinema, because Japanese cinema is also something that was kind of coming up in the 60s,
right?
Influencing American directors, and when we talked off camera about directors that also have an influence, someone like a Tarantino is influenced by kung fu films and martial arts
massively influenced. I mean, Kill Bill Volume 1 is an homage to Bruce Lee's Game of Death. It's an homage to Enter the Dragon. There's homages to Lady Snowblood. There's homages to a lot of old school Chinese movies, but then old school kung fu movies. But it also plays with the visuals and the adaptations of these films with the bride wearing the yellow suit that Bruce Lee wears in is that Game of Death?
Game of Death.
Yeah. To the whole ending being exactly like Lady Snowblood. He takes from that stuff visually, but he uses the audio and the soundtrack and incorporates a lot of like Western type music with like Isaac Hayes and like all of Bernard Herrmann from using his score from one of his movies. He uses Western music to kind of elevate the Western appeal of it. So I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother used to watch Kill Bill all the time because that was just like her. She grew up on kung fu movies, and it was kind of like the modern version of that, but it's very Westernized, which opens up a whole conversation about cultural appropriation or what is or what isn't cultural appropriation. But to some extent, Tarantino, he kind of outwardly ratifies what the influences of kung fu movies are and kind of incorporates more of the Americanized music into the soundtrack of Kill Bill Volume 1, at least.
Yeah, and let's kind of jump into the conception of it, which what we all agree is Bruce Lee. I feel like Bruce Lee is the one who really broke through and incorporated martial arts into American TV to begin with, because it started with the Green Hornet, I believe. I don't know if that's the first, but I think it's the first.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the Green Hornet.
He had actually pitched a show. He had pitched a show to American studios for them to pick up, but they ultimately turned it down because he couldn't speak well enough English. So they ended up casting David Cardigan. He's the dude who actually plays Bill in Kill Bill. In Kill Bill Volume 2.
Totally. Yeah.
So the whole reason of the Kill Bill Volume 1 of her being in that suit and the actual Bill being the guy who's basically the guy who killed Bruce Lee's career is the character who is somebody. The character of Bill represents the actor of David Carnahan taking the role away from Bruce Lee back all those years ago. I forgot what the show was called. I'm gonna pull it up real quick. But yeah, it was originally another show that he pitched to American studios. They turned him down. He moved back to China or Hong Kong. I don't want to
Hong Kong. Yeah.
Hong Kong. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. But then he came back, and Green Hornet was like the American crossover.
Yeah, and Green Hornet is kind of what jump started Bruce Lee into the minds of American audiences, where people were like, "Who is this guy? He's incredible," and that's Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee really brought a lot, and that was, I believe, the 60s. But right when he got into his own films and he started making movies like Enter the Dragon and Fist of Fury. Fighting people like Chuck Norris. And that kind of became...
The Chuck Norris fight is great. I don't know I'm sure you've seen that movie.
Of course.
It's in the background is the Colosseums of... was that in Italy or in Rome? Yeah, the Rome Colosseums. Yeah, it's nice. It's super nice.
No, it's absolutely amazing. And obviously the one... that really impacted me was Enter the Dragon. I remember that movie because I've seen it so many times, but I remember watching that as a kid, and that's kind of the introduction of Bruce Lee that I got. And it's one of those things where you really believe that this man is invincible, that he can beat anyone, and that he is this unstoppable force that could take down 20 dudes at once, and he could take down any champion from anywhere. And he's this unbeatable, legendary fighter where that what it is, RB3, and the thing that sold it is that he's doing everything on screen. Everything you see is Bruce Lee. It's not a stunt double. It's not. So you truly believe that this man has the ability to do everything that he's doing in the movie. So
Right.
if he kills a man in 2 seconds, you're like, yeah, he really could kill a man if he wasn't holding back. That's the idea of it. And nowadays we see it with actors attempting to do this kind of stuff, whether it's someone like a Tom Cruise doing his action scenes or someone like a Keanu Reeves, what we saw in John Wick doing his fight scenes. It's seeing the actor, the person, the combination between stunt performer, martial arts, and actor. And that was Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was an actor and a martial arts expert, a stunt performer that you believe was doing everything on camera because he was doing everything on camera.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think Into the Dragon has such a big impact, too, because it was also the first Kung Fu movie that was fully financed by a United States production studio. So it had a big cultural impact, like from a cultural perspective. But I think from an aesthetic perspective, like you said, it introduced the whole notion of practical stunts, physical fighting, and having that be an ability of action stars. I mean, like I said, the 80s are kind of a weird time because we came back to having people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It all comes in cycles, you know what I mean? Like there's always cycles where it comes to how we portray American heroes versus how we portray non-American heroes, right? In the 80s, it was very pro-America, so it was very much like you have to be big, muscular, or you have to be like Bruce Willis, or you have to be the everyman or something like that. But Bruce Lee was kind of the one who kind of who paved the way for people like Jackie Chan to have an American career, who paved the way for a lot of, there's so many like great, stunt performers now that, and again, it's how it incorporated into mainstream action. Now, there's not a lot of Kung Fu movies or martial arts movies per se directly, but it's all influenced by what Bruce Lee kind of set the standard for in American cinema.
And it's that idea of like what I just said, of seeing the person you relate to, seeing the actor, the star, being the person who's kicking the person in the face or doing a backflip or doing something incredible that no one else can do. But a lot of it too stems from style, and I want to stress that because I feel like a lot of what martial arts is, and especially Bruce Lee, being someone who grew up playing Tekken, for example. I don't know if you've played Tekken, but the character of I think it's Forrest Law or Martial Law, being a direct copy of Bruce Lee, but his style is what made Bruce Lee so famous because it's so over the top, loud, in your face. My mom used to say possessed. He's like possessed when he fights. Like he goes, he's like, whoa, like his eyes almost twitch and he's beating everyone and going so fast. And it's that, like you said, kinetic style that he had that really made people feel like, oh my God, he's scary. Like this guy could beat anyone up because he becomes this monster when he fights.
It's presence too. It's presence. And I think presence is another reason why it became such a big cultural mainstay in Black communities because you could tell. I mean, just look at somebody like Wu-Tang Clan or look at the RZA in particular. Like
RZA especially.
I mean, huge martial arts fans, huge Kung Fu fans because of the power that Bruce Lee kind of presented on screen, because of the power that a lot of these martial arts films portrayed these heroes as, it's a lot about how they use fighting styles that are not particularly in sync with what, everybody else is doing. I mean, everybody else is just ready to shoot or just ready to like punch or box or whatever because, that's all people know. But there's this whole new style of fighting that people weren't attuned to at the time, so it kind of connected on a whole nother level. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we got from the 80s, too, was this emergence of Jackie Chan, who also brought in something very specific and very different. But what made Jackie Chan different, and if my brother was here, he would tell you a little bit more about it because he's talked to me about it personally, about what made Jackie Chan different, and that is he combined the martial arts with the stunt performer, where he would climb up rigs and jump off buildings. He would dive through cars, and he would do incredible stunts, not just kicking and punching, but actual stunts where he's jumping off things that you're not supposed to jump off of because you need a wire or you need something like that. But he would do it without a wire. He would do it without any attachments. He would just do everything on camera and fully commit to the danger of a stunt. And that's kind of the idea of the incorporation of a Jackie Chan and how he became so famous in America as well. I mean, obviously Drunken Master.
Drunken Master was the big one.
The Rumble in the Bronx was another
Rumble
one.
in the Bronx, yeah.
Like, these are the ones that kind of made Jackie Chan
the reputation,
gave him
the reputation. Yeah. And I think, you know, in the early 80s, there was kind of the appropriation of Kung Fu and karate with like the Karate Kid that came out, I guess in 81 or 82 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was kind of,
which obviously everyone's seen, but
everybody's seen. I mean, I don't think it's.
But as a kid, it made you want to be a Bruce Lee is really what made me want to do martial arts. But if you grew up in my era, RV3, and I'm sure your era a little bit as well, it's like when you're a kid, bro, it's like you want a black belt, bro. Like you want to do martial arts.
I mean, I've never liked the original Karate Kid. I personally am a Jaden Smith fan, so. That's the
I love that one too.
Connect to, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's an example of something that kind of inspired kids to get into, because that came out in the early 80s. So by the time the late 80s came around, the kids who are watching Karate Kids are now adults watching Jackie Chan movies. So it's like it kind of created, even though, you know, Karate Kid is a form of cultural appropriation because it's a white dude learning from a formal, you know, mystic Asian master to teach him karate, but it enabled the karate and kung fu and martial arts to become such a practical part of action cinema. And one thing that Bruce Lee also did that I think Jackie Chan incorporates a lot when we talk about kineticism. You know, Bruce Lee incorporated a lot of they call the Ali shuffle, you know, how he like taps his toes around and you know how Ali, you know, boxes, you know. So Jackie Chan kind of takes that to the whole next level, where he's literally dancing. I mean, you see I watched Drunken Master right before I got here.
It's crazy.
So I mean, he's literally dancing around fools, like literally. I mean, it's just it's very fast. I mean, and that's the thing. You have to have an incredible physical and athletic presence and poise to be able to pull off a lot of stuff that Bruce Lee pulls off, or especially that Jackie Chan pulls off. So
yeah, I remember my brother and I had this conversation, and he showed me some stunts that Jackie Chan did, and he's like, "I'm telling you, man, like this is stuff that people don't do anymore because it would get you killed." And insurance companies would be like, "Nope, you're not doing that," and he would do it without a wire, and he would do. I forget one stunt specifically. He told me where he just jumped from like a certain section that was like 3 stories or something. And he's like, "Dude, this is crazy." But eventually everything is like passing the baton, and eventually we get to someone that I don't know if you have a connection to. I have a little bit of a connection to, obviously not as much as Bruce Lee, but Jet Li.
Yeah,
90s.
Jet Li. Oh yeah, definitely. Late 90s.
Fist of Legend is something that kind of really incorporated Jet Li into mainstream American cinema, and it made him a household name, and it made him a legend, along with passing the baton from Bruce Lee to Jackie Chan and now to Jet Li.
Yeah,
what's your connection to Jet Li, man?
No, I'm big on Jet Li. Yeah, again, my grandmother raised me on a lot of kung fu movies. So Jet Li, I've seen a lot of. I mean, I most finally have a connection to Kiss of the Dragon. That's the one that I remember seeing the most as a kid. That was the one that I remember. I remember so vividly because they used to show that all the time. I think on TNT or whatever. But yeah, that was the one that I remember the most. I also was big on the other one, the Foreign Kingdom, the Forbidden Kingdom. Forbidden Kingdom. That was great. Later on in life, I saw the movie Hero, which is not necessarily a martial arts movie, but it's more of a war movie. But it's Hong Kong cinema. So but again, he's somebody who came from Hong Kong cinema and transitioned over to American audiences because of the physical regimen that was entailed.
It's also what's the one he does with that Aaliyah music video? Do you know which one I'm talking about? Really?
No, I'm not sure.
Really? Is it Romeo Must Die? It might be Romeo Must Die or I think it's Romeo Must Die. But there's one with Aaliyah. You know that song from Aaliyah?
No, I'm not sure.
Oh, Jesus, this is.
I missed that one.
It's try again. Romeo Must Die. Like I literally just looked it up. But this is straight from Bruce Lee. The song.
Okay, yeah, I know the song.
He's in the video.
Oh, really? Oh, I know he was in the video.
Yeah,
That's
because
crazy.
this song was connected to the movie Romeo Must Die. This is when Jet Li was doing hip hop martial arts movies.
Yeah.
He did that one with DMX.
What's that one? I don't think I've seen that one.
Really, you haven't seen this?
No.
This is Romeo Must Die, the one with Jet Li and
I think I've seen Romeo Must Die when I was a kid. Definitely.
Cradle to the Grave.
I don't think I've seen that one.
These are all like martial arts hip hop movies where he would do it with like hip hop stars and they had like a hip hop background and track.
But see, I mean, that's the connection, though. I mean, that's just the connection that, again, it had to the black community and it had to hip hop. I mean,
I saw these. I grew up with these movies. So.
I mean, rappers grew up spitting nothing but bars for Jet Li and
Bruce
Jackie
Lee.
Chan. Yeah. So much respect to that. I'll keep that out. I've seen Romeo Must Die when I was a kid. Now I'm thinking about it, but I gotta check out Cradle to the Grave. I gotta check that one out next.
Yeah. And obviously it's something that I really want to touch on that kind of leads into the modern era. Is the movie that kind of broke the barrier and really brought this into like huge audiences, and that's I rewatched this over the weekend, man. The Matrix. The Matrix really does bring that mix of cyberpunk, sci-fi, action, martial arts movie. Like it's all this combination.
Yeah, it's a combination. Yeah,
and it's
genre bending,
and a lot of it comes from the martial arts in this movie, and it's because they were, I don't know if you've seen the Matrix documentary behind the scenes thing, but they talk about how they hired like professional like kung fu cinema Hong Kong dudes to train Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne, even Hugo Weaving, to actually do these fight scenes and to really commit to these fight scenes. And they taught them wire work and they taught them how to go, all these different types of martial arts and martial arts stances, because stances is like a huge part of it.
Right.
And it delivered, man. It really made you feel like, holy crap, this is absolutely incredible. And it was an introduction for a lot of people who maybe weren't a fan or haven't seen kung fu cinema before.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Obviously, it has a big martial arts influence. I think it goes to the Matrix having an overall theme of like breaking out of the system, right? Breaking out of the kind of the programming that's kind of installed into us, right? That's the kind of the general theme of the Matrix, and that's kind of the general theme throughout martial arts movies too. I feel like martial arts movies in and of themselves have always had a message about self-expression and self-realization, and they're very spiritual movies. So having a sci-fi film like The Matrix incorporate these elements of spirituality and self-expression and self-reflection through its portrayal of kung fu and through its portrayal of karate really makes that like stand out significantly. So.
Yeah, but some of the best scenes in this, I still think the final fight scene is one of the best fight scenes in any movie ever. When he fights the Agent Smith.
Yeah.
In the subway.
That's what's weird about the Matrix is cool because it is very much they use martial arts fighting, but they shoot it like a Western because like literally they size up like and they have
there's
like
literally like
the
a paper that rolls.
Yeah. They shoot it like a Western, but then they take the aesthetic from like French, like European cinema. So like it's very like densely lit and like one weird color, like green's the main color in that movie.
I love how that movie. It's one of the best shot movies ever, dude.
Yeah.
Bill Pope, shout out to Bill Pope.
Bill Pope's great, man. He
shot Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's still pumping out great work.
Yeah, he did Baby Driver 2 years ago.
I don't think that was that great. Great job from him though. Not movie wise.
I think he's one of the best DPs ever.
Yeah.
I love just The Matrix and Spider-Man 2, two of the best action movies ever.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Just that makes him a legend.
He did something else recently that he earned an Oscar nomination for,
really?
right? Yeah.
I don't know.
If I'm not mistaken.
But either way, the fight scene with him and Morpheus is the first fight scene when we see him do all the different types of martial arts. And the speed at which Keanu goes and the speed at which Lawrence Fishburne goes is absolutely incredible, and that shows the commitment they had to the training. One of my favorite parts of that fight scene is because we're supposed to believe that he knows all these different types of martial arts, is when he does the Bruce Lee. I don't know if you caught that if you've rewatched The Matrix recently.
I don't think I've caught
he does
that.
he does the Bruce Lee.
Oh, the whole thing where he does the
whole thing and he goes like that.
Oh yeah.
When Keanu Reeves that like imitates Bruce Lee, saying that that's part of the training that he learned was Bruce Lee's fighting style.
Oh, so he downloaded because
he downloaded Bruce Lee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay. Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know if you caught that, but I was like, yeah, you're supposed to believe that Bruce Lee's training is now inside Neo.
Oh, that's funny.
That's so cool. That's like the coolest thing ever. You imagine just download Bruce Lee's martial arts skills. That's a power I want right there.
Yeah, that's the power that everybody should get.
But it really does show you the effectiveness of a martial arts fight scene and the ability to shoot it in a very compelling way that makes you your adrenaline pump basically and makes it just as much an action scene as a gun shootout or a car chase or whatever it is that makes an action scene. That is just as much an action scene as anything else.
But there's also a lot of gunplay in Matrix as well. So again, I mean that's kind of the beginning of Keanu Reeves' like martial arts career because previously he's been in movies like Speed and
not Prison Break.
Point Break.
Break.
Yeah, which are very like standard kind of action movies. Again, American action movies are inspired by Hong Kong cinema for mostly, again, like John Woo, kind of being a big influence for the 90s. But, having Keanu Reeves as Neo in The Matrix ultimately directly inspired his John Wick portrayal because it's like the mixture of the Kung Fu, the mixture of the karate, the mixture of the martial arts, and the mixture of the shooting guns. And again, the John Wick movies also take from the same kind of European, like super dark and green lit kind of cinematography. So you could tell that in making John Wick, he was kind of intending to pay a big homage to The Matrix, even as far as casting Lawrence Fishburne in the part. But I think in terms of what embodies, in terms of who embodies martial arts the most in today's films. I think a lot of times now that cinema is a lot more open, now that everybody in America can consume world cinema a lot easier. I think the modern kung fu movies are kind of the raid films, if anything, or the IP Man movies. But those are also Ip Man, they call it IP Man, Ip Man movies. But those are all foreign films. So it's kind of like we're getting back to like the 60s and the 70s days of like being open and receiving that as our primary source of kung fu cinema instead of the mainstream action films.
It's interesting where we are now. And before we jump to now, I have to mention Tony Jaa. I don't know if you know who Tony Jaa is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Tony Jaa,
Ong Bak Warrior. And that also brought in, and I really want to stress this because you mentioned the raid and I want to get there, but Thailand, Muay Thai. Like it incorporated a different type because we've seen Kung Fu, we've seen Tai Chi with Chinese, we've seen wire work with different, Chinese films as well. We see a lot of China, a lot of Japan because Japan also has karate.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Taekwondo from Korea. But now Thailand, a country that's very much not inside these massive movie kind of Eastern films that we know, like Japan. We know Japanese films, we know Chinese films, we know these, but Thailand is a country that now their style of martial arts, Muay Thai, is considered one of the most dangerous on the planet. Obviously, it's one of the most practiced martial arts in MMA. You have to train Muay Thai if you're going to fight in MMA in the UFC. That's just mandatory. And Tony Jaa really did bring that level of wow factor that Bruce Lee delivered and that Jackie Chan and Jet Li and all these people we've been talking about. So I'd be remiss to not mention him.
Yeah.
But my friends love Ong Bak and Ong Bak Warrior and all these Muay Thai films. So obviously I want to mention him. And obviously, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, we also got to shout out Stephen Chow as well for, the homie who made Shaolin Soccer and what was the other? Oh man, what was the one he made? The Kung Fu movie he made. But he's kind of the idea of like the kung fu spoof movies, right? The martial arts spoof movies. But they also, I mean, I remember watching Kung Fu Hustle. There it is, Kung Fu Hustle. I remember watching Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer so much as a kid that those are movies that kind of really engaged me into the idea of watching martial arts films and kind of the idea of them being not just action, movies. They're kind of sports movies too, or at least Shaolin Soccer is a sports movie. And then Kung Fu Hustle is more of a crime movie, but again, it comes from that Hong Kong influence, and Stephen Chow is from Hong Kong as well. So.
You know what it is too? And I can't believe I didn't mention this, but you know what? Something I grew up on too, and I've mentioned it a million times, Blade.
Oh, yeah.
Blade.
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes.
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes really did. He was good, man. He was freaking good. And he really did deliver on those fight scenes, showing off his martial arts skills. And it also goes back to like, how Kung Fu movies influenced a lot of, African-American actors and African-American cinema goers to the point that, he's a black superhero who can kick ass, literally, with martial arts.
Yeah.
So that's a big one for sure. And it's one of those things where martial arts in cinema now is entirely different because we are now in a different time of action movies. I kind of want to go to that a little bit, unless you have any final thoughts on.
Well, no, I mean, we touched on like Kill Bill, but I think also Kill Bill Volume 1 at least brought a lot of, audiences into the idea of martial arts cinema as well. Like I said, Tarantino's kind of bringing a lot of that bringing a lot of the references and influences from 70s films and, Bruce Lee, and particularly Bruce Lee, Lady Snowblood. And a lot of the music that he uses in that movie comes from older Kung Fu movies as well. But yeah, that's all incorporated into, and I think for the most part that has a wide-reaching. It still kind of has a wide-reaching effect onto society. So people are still mentioning Kill Bill as like one of their primary things.
Yeah, and I kind of want to jump into action movies and modern action movies and kind of what makes an action movie nowadays, especially because I feel like when it comes to Eastern influence, it's not, besides John Wick, I don't see it as much, or I see it as an escape or as a villain. I don't see a lot of Asian leads really taking the stage as much, which is disappointing, and I want to see more of it. You can mention some of the foreign ones like Hitman, like The Raid, but besides that, it's. I feel like if you say action movie right now, what is the action movie franchise that people go to the cinemas and it's like a $1 billion movie franchise? What is that?
Superhero movies.
Superhero movies, sure. But I feel like, here's my thing. If I made a list of the 10 best action movies in the past 10 to 15 years or 20 years or whatever, am I really gonna? It's a CGI fest. The MC, like that's why I told.
I put Winter Soldier.
That's why I told you Winter Soldier, because Winter Soldier has the least amount of CGI, and it has when Bucky fights Cap, you feel the punches because they're punching each other and they're not flying in the air and throwing missiles at each other. They're punching each other, and that's something that's so effective. But besides, you see what I'm saying? Like superhero movies.
Well, so I think this is
it's just CGI.
Well, see, I think it's just. Thank you, Ace. I'm glad we're finally seeing the same page here. I'm just kidding. But I think they are CGI fest, and I think it is annoying. I think every third act just kind of turns into something made by a computer.
That's why superhero movies has become its own genre. If I say superhero movies, it's different than action movies.
But no, see, but
I don't see them as both.
I think they are very clearly action movies, and here's why. You remember how I kind of said earlier why Kung Fu movies are popular because they represent a revolutionary cinema. I think every popular subgenre that ends up creeping into the mainstream is a buck against the establishment, right? Is a revolutionary piece of cinema. Spaghetti westerns are kind of revolutionary from American westerns because it's Italian perspective. Kung Fu movies, same thing. I think superhero movies are their own form of revolutionary cinema, but through nostalgia. It's revolutionary to the people who were born in the 70s, 80s, 90s, who read comic books and were called nerds and bullied their entire life. Now it's the opportunity for that to kind of creep into the mainstream,
Sure.
So I think in that sense, they classify as the tradition of action movies is the tradition of, you know.
Sure.
But now, do they represent the aesthetic of action movies? Not necessarily, but the ones that do represent the aesthetic of action movies aren't really usually that good. I mean, the Mark Wahlberg, what's that Mark Wahlberg movie that came out last year?
I didn't see it.
Mile 22 or whatever?
Yeah.
Garbage, you know? I mean, most movies that try to be just regular throwback action movies
Don't work out.
aren't working, and the audiences have obviously evolved beyond the point of.
I'm curious about that because I was listening to the Ringer podcast where they interviewed the director of John Wick 3, Chad Vilowski, something like that.
Yeah, directed all of the previous ones.
Yeah, and he kind of got into the conversation about action movies and getting audiences to not just go see them but like them. You know, the idea of reviews. How do you review an action movie? How do you quantify or qualify what is good and what is bad? Because we've seen so many, RB3, you just mentioned a few of them that are action movies, but they're shit. And why people hate them now.
White people. I think most people hate them now.
No, I didn't say why. I say why people hate him.
Okay.
Is something that I don't know. Like, what is it that makes a good action movie? Because you can say, oh, well, where's the story? Where's the character development? But I can counter you, RB3, and say, where's the character development in John Wick 3?
Well, yeah.
But you see what I'm saying?
That's a little bit my problem with John Wick 3, too, though.
That's why I like John Wick 2 more. But then again, I could say there's not really much in John Wick 2 either.
Yeah, it's not.
There's not.
They're so simple.
What are you there to see in an action movie if not just really cool action? If a movie gives me really cool, it's the idea of like a comedy. What makes a good? If I laughed, was it a good comedy? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Like, what makes a good action movie?
Well, I think good action movies. You know, first step it gotta be good action, but I think really. I think the first step has to be a good story.
And the story and the characters suck.
I think the first step in any good movie is a good story. I think the first step in any good movie. So I kind of said that dismissively, but I really do think that's the first step, right? And I think the first John Wick movie has an amazing story. Like a guy loses his wife leaves him a dog, somebody kills the dog, he goes on a revenge. You know, like very basic, very simple. You know, like I think the problem is a lot of action movies get too caught up in the plotting and the methodical like plot beats and we have to make sure we have a romance, we have to have comedy and all these things. Like no, I think if you get it down to the bare essentials, like just make it a simple story about a simple story with good action and good. I think what an action movie needs to be a good action movie and to be a good movie. Just to be a good movie. I think just have good acting. I think the biggest problem with movies like Mile 22. I mean, I didn't see it, but I think the biggest problem with a movie like that is that the acting is probably terrible. The direction is probably terrible. I don't think you should be shaking the camera every 2 seconds if you have an action scene. Now that being said, there's a clear difference between handheld cinematography and shaky cam. Where, if you have a handheld shot, it's going to be a little shakier because somebody's actually holding it. But if you're like literally intentionally shaking the camera to heighten, suspense or whatever, then it looks garbage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with a lot of, that's the problem with a lot of action movies now. A lot of them kind of chase this like documentary realism, like aesthetic that became popular through people like Paul Greengrass and Captain Bigelow. So a lot of them are trying to be like this, like really like shaky, gritty type, and it's a good way to hide the action too. It's a good way to like not, to not show the punches as clearly. But I think that's kind of the downfall of the action. I think the John Wick movies are great because they're directed by stuntmen, and stuntmen know how to shoot the action to appreciate the action, you know? So I think, basically in a long roundabout way of answering your question, I think a good action movie just has to be a good movie and also shoot the fight scenes well. I think that's pretty much all it comes down to,
Yeah.
But I don't know how good. I don't know what's the ratio, because to me it's like John Wick kind of told the ratio of being too much great. The action and the actual story just kind of like almost on two different two different levels. Like there's so much great action and the film's more than 50% action. So the more than 50% that's like action and shooting is great, but the like the 45% that's like actual story is like not working at all. So
It really is an interesting conversation, and it develops into the conversation of modern Hollywood and studios, because I kind of had this conversation about Game of Thrones recently, because this last season we had this debate of whether this last season was a successful season or not, and I know Game of Thrones goes over your head because you don't watch Game of Thrones, but my thing was I made an argument that this last season of Game of Thrones may have been a mixed bag, to say the least, when it comes to story. But it gave us two of the most incredible episodes I've ever seen on TV. And that's one of them was The Long Night, the one you saw. You saw The Long Night.
Yeah, I saw The Long Night.
That shit went hard.
It was dope.
That shit was dope.
Yeah.
And it's that idea of that being considered art, right? Because it is. And I made an argument that that's just as much art as a boardroom conversation or the king talking to the queen in a very heated argument. Like, that's just as much art as that. Like, that to me is my perspective. Like, because there is art to action and spectacle and battle and choreography. That's beauty. That's what we're talking about right now, because that's what martial arts and that's what action cinema is. Yeah. So I do feel like it becomes a little bit monotonous, and people be like, oh, I'm bored. We get it. He's punching through walls or whatever. He's fighting zombies or whatever the action is. But in reality, there's a lot of greatness to it. So I'm curious to find the disconnect between critics and action movies, because I feel like it's more critics than audiences. I feel like audiences have an easier time kind of just letting the movie tell me what the action is.
But then again, I have a hard time thinking of a movie that is solely an action movie that's like high grossing recently too. You know what I mean? I mean, besides John Wick, I think John Wick is the exception. I think John Wick is absolutely the exception.
Okay, so if I want to bring you modern action movie franchises, we have to talk about Mission Impossible franchise.
Yeah,
that's the first thing that comes to my head.
Well, yeah. Oh, I mean, that's also a great one. I mean, that's
a pure action movie.
Those are pure action movies. I mean, they have spy movie elements, spy movie crossover elements too. But I think,
the action set pieces in those things are what people pay money to see and what people want to see. And those movies are long as hell. Yeah. That last one was like 2.5 hours.
Well, see, that's why I'm saying, like, if you make an action movie where the movie itself, the story itself is actually really good, and then the action on top of it is amazing, like even if the story sucks but the action is like top tier, then people are going to remember the action at the very least. Yeah. But because Mission Impossible is I personally think, I don't think you agree necessarily with the last one per se having a great story. Did you say that? Were you the one who said that?
I didn't say that.
Somebody who I know said they hated the last one. They didn't hate the last one, but they thought the story was just whatever. They wouldn't watch it again, Yeah. But I think that the story in that movie is compelling enough to keep you motivated to going into the next action sequence. And then once you get to that action sequence, it's mind-blowing.
Sure.
Because
it keeps you interested enough, the story. So you think that's the purpose of it?
I think that's the key. Because even for me, like the Raid 2, like like just kind of not jumping ahead, but getting into it. No, I'm saying like I really like the Raid 2 because the story in and of itself is actually interesting. Yeah. And then when the action comes, it's just like an explosion. You know what I mean? Now I think the story of Raid 1 is a little. I prefer the simpler story and great action over the complicated story and great action. Sure. But Raid 2 is way more complicated than the Raid 1 because the Raid 1 is just one building, But that being said, the story of the Raid 2 is actually compelling enough. And you actually get a lot out of the character. I mean, the character starts off being locked up in jail, and then he fights his way out of that shit in that amazing prison breakout scene.
Mud fight.
Yeah,
Good. And so it's a oneer. Yeah, like half of it is a oneer.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I just watched it last night, so it's fresh in my head.
But it has enough. It has enough elements, enough gangster elements, enough. And again, even though the movie's origins they're not Thailand, but it's Indonesian, yeah, there it is. Even though the movie's origins are Indonesian kind of based, again, the Hong Kong cinema kind of influence. I mean, Hong Kong cinema is also very popular for its gangster movies.
It is
very popular.
Crime movies.
Yeah. So this has a very heavy crime element that is actually really compelling in and of itself. So I think that's
very Infernal Affairs. Is that what it's called?
Infernal Affairs, yeah. Which it got adapted into
The Departed.
The Departed.
Yeah, it's a Hong Kong movie. Yeah,
That's a Hong Kong movie.
It's very right too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's very much about like the crime stories that keep that movie pushing.
Let me keep going. I'm going off a few websites here talking about the best action movies in the past 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
The Mission Impossible movies, and then the Fast and Furious movies come up. So Fast 5 is ranked as one of the highest.
That's great.
One of the best. It's Fast 5 is pretty good, but I feel like Fast 6 and Fast 7 gets so ridiculous.
I don't know if I agree with that.
And Fast 8 gets so really. You don't feel like.
All right, Fast 8 a little bit. Yeah, Fast 8 a little bit. Fast.
But the Fast and Furious franchise, if I were to say what is the biggest action movie franchise, that is the one.
That's the one. Yeah,
it is. It's the biggest one.
Yeah,
because it makes as much as like Star Wars movies make. Like it makes a ton of money.
Yeah.
And people really like those movies, but those are kind of silly.
Well,
right?
But they're silly.
Do they have enough story to make me feel like I'm make it a good movie?
Well, they're blockbusters, and they connect.
No, but I'm saying, what makes a good? You just see what I'm saying? Like, why is that good? Even though it's silly and ridiculous, and not something like, I don't know, a Mark Wahlberg action movie, not Mile 22, but like another one.
I think it's silly and ridiculous, but it's also it fits into just the right studio formula to like make it not like total garbage. You know what I mean? Like it's very much enough within generic kind of storytelling, and plus, I mean, you made this point several times on the show. The movie stars Vin Diesel, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez. It stars people of color, and it connects with a lot more people of color than any other franchise out there does. So it definitely has a lot of that going for it. It will always have its core fan base, and it's a franchise that elevated from being an original, the original 2001 movie being a car racing movie to now them being gigantic heist / international spy movies. So the evolution has kept people going into that as well.
I feel like, but when it comes to the action scenes themselves, I feel like some of them are more successful than others. That's just me. Yeah. Whereas like Fast 5, everything in that is like dope as hell. But the other ones, some of it is.
Well, they get to. I think 6, 7, and 8 has gotten more mired in the CGI aspects of it.
That's exactly what it is, RB3. It's this is what I was going to make this argument for another movie. I guess we can talk about it now. Why not? Mad Max Fury Road. That's the first thing that comes to mind when people say best action movie in the past 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Mad Max. The reason why I loved Mad Max, and it's going to go to my point of action movies in general about CGI, is because you feel those cars flying at you. You can feel the weight of actual physical cars, not CGI cars, but real cars flying at the camera, and you go, oh shit, because it's like, oh my God, a 2,000, 3,000 pound object flying at the camera. That you feeling the weight, feeling the texture, feeling the violence, I guess, because that's what action movies are, it's violence. Makes a better and more compelling action movie. That's just my opinion. That's why we talked about the superhero stuff.
Yeah.
That's why Winter Soldier to me is one of the best action movies in the past 10 to 20 years, because when he pulls out the Gatling gun and starts like and going through the car and shredding this bus in half, it's a real bus. Like you see the bus and you see the metal and you can feel it, and you can feel the punches when they fight. Mad Max, what makes that movie so good is the practical effects, RB3. That's what it is.
I mean,
because the story is like this.
No, I know that. I 100% disagree with that. No, stop it. I 100% disagree with that. And I was gonna say, like, I personally think
I love that movie. I just saw it 2 days ago.
Yeah, I think you saw it 2 days ago. But you think the story
for this.
She's
saving the wives from Immortan Joe.
Yeah,
that's the story.
It's a great story.
That's a great story. I agree. But it's not minimal. It's not a big part of the movie.
It's not dialogue driven, but story itself, I think the story itself is because it's all about reclaiming. It's all about reclaiming what you own, right? The whole idea of them like going back and doing all this. Like, I think
it's cool. Don't get me wrong. It's great, but it's not like it's this. Really, I can write a dissertation on it or something.
I can 100% write a dissertation about the story of this movie, because I think story beats. I kind of look at stories in two ways, right? Story beats and story representation, right? Not representation, but what the story is ultimately trying to say, you know? And I think the message that the movie is, because it's very much, it's not a standard action movie in the fact that the lead action hero in and of himself is kind of a passive character throughout the film.
Doesn't say much.
Yeah, he doesn't say much, but he also just kind of goes along for the ride, you know? But
he's still cool. I still argue, and it's one of those things where there was a huge argument about it when the movie first came out, as far as like, whose movie is it, Furiosa or Max? Yeah. I still think Max is awesome in that movie.
No, he's great.
I think he's awesome.
I think it's a particularly unique movie because it's a movie that's presented through somebody else's perspective, right? So it's kind of just a window into like this overall story. So I think what the film achieves in both world building and is
the world building is incredible. That's true.
I think what it incorporates through world building, what it incorporates through having an alternative point of view and not having a traditional kind of point of view character, and in this overall theme of like, you know, I mean, a lot of people call it a feminist movie. I think it's a very feminist movie because it's all about these group of women who escape oppression and end up reclaiming, you know, I've said it before, reclaiming their, you know. So I think even though the story beats in and of themselves are minimal, I think the everything else surrounding the story and the character development between every single character, because in like tiny ways you can see micro adjustments between every character. And it doesn't do that through dialogue. It shows it does it through action. Yeah. I mean,
the connection between Max and Furiosa. Yeah, when they don't trust each other and they want to kill each other for like half the movie.
Yeah. Well, even I think Nicholas Holt's character is probably one of my favorite characters. Nuts. Like, and because he goes from being this gratified, like super, you know, traditionalist killer.
Almost a brainwashed.
Yeah, brainwashed. Yeah, but establishing his own freedom, like gaining his own independence. Like I think to that scene,
and he's the hero in the last scene. Yeah,
100%. And I think to that one scene it's a very quiet moment, but they're all driving in the truck, and then everybody's asleep, but he's still up, and I think a little bug like flies on him, and he just eats it, you know, like and. When you think about it, that's the first time that character's actually ever eaten something in that entire movie. You know, their blood is literally being sucked out of him. He has a half of a life, so he is almost the epitome of dehumanized or being taken out of. You know, I don't want to say demasculated, but having your independence stripped away from you. He's kind of the epitome of that. But then over the course of the film, he kind of regains that. True. And he kind of aids in the journey of the women doing that too. So I think to me, that movie Mad Max Fury Road is a lot more complex. Now I think a lot of other people think is complex.
But what sells the movie is the
practical stunts,
the incredible action set pieces, which are crazy. Like they're really freaking cool.
I mean, they spent like 9 months out there in the
it's like a $200 million budget.
Australian desert. And of course, George Miller's wife actually cut the film herself. So they had. I mean, it was. I think it has something like 1,600 cuts or something like that. Like
it's crazy.
It's a lot, but I think.
And the way it's shot too.
I think the cinematography is also.
I thought it. I mean, it's one of the best of the year.
Well, I think it was the best of the year. I think it won that year.
It didn't win that year. I looked it up because I was like, how did this not win? And then I was like, oh yeah, The Revenant came out.
That's funny. That's another practical
I was gonna say The Revenant.
Yeah, that's another.
It's one of the best shot movies ever.
I wouldn't say that, but
I would. I totally would. But I would have given it to Mad Max. But I was like, okay, The Revenant's that's pretty dope.
The Mad Max did use CGI in terms of like environment, and they used it for that big weather storm sequence.
But you feel the practical effects, and that's what sells the movie so much to me. Let's talk about another one that keeps coming up on this list, and I love these movies, and this is much more me. Yeah. But the new James Bond films, Casino Royale, man, Skyfall.
Casino Royale, I would consider more of an action movie.
Casino Royale is dope. That first action scene, the parkour scene. Is so freaking cool. Well,
they also have the fight in the bathroom. That's the first. That's
fight in the
bathroom.
Dude. I mean, this movie's awesome. I definitely put it up there as one of the best action movies in the past 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I have a hard time putting James Bond movies in action movies. I like to think of them as spy movies. Personally, But Casino Royale is definitely the one with the most action, I think, out of any of them.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's my favorite. Obviously.
Yeah. I'm a Skyfall guy personally.
Oh, dude, I love Casino Royale.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I love Casino Royale too. But in terms of like the new franchise,
Sure.
I'll put Skyfall a little bit higher, only because it's more of a throwback to the '60s Bond, and I like that. So,
another one that keeps coming up on this list, 300. Zack Snyder,
yeah,
that's pure action right there.
Yeah, well, we talked. You replied to my tweet with SZA and DJ Khaled. It's ripping off 300, Rise of the Empire.
Oh my God,
that's a great song though. Great song.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Why you hating, man? You hating because the Outkast sample?
Yeah,
that's why you hating. Yeah, man, I love that shit, man. That was nice.
But 300 is pure masculine adrenaline action craziness.
But that was all that's all CGI though.
Not the fights.
The fights are practical, but everything in the background is CGI.
Yeah, but the background is it's different than a CGI Iron Man flying around. You see what I'm saying? Like CGI characters.
Yeah.
Fights aren't compelling to me. They're not. But it's a real person, though. It's not the CGI background is there, but it's still a real person fighting.
Yeah.
It's not a CGI person.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think that one's up there. I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
Another one that we have to talk about is one that keeps coming up here, and I don't know. I kind of want to talk to you about it. Is The Dark Knight as an action movie? Is that an action movie?
I personally see it more as a crime drama, but the action, the fights, the action is great. The fight scenes are terrible, or terribly shot at the very least. Because that's also a distinction that has to be made too. Is the distinction between the fight choreography itself and how it's shot. Because, like I said, the John Wick movies do it really well because they're directed by stuntmen. Stuntmen know what's the best angle to put, the camera for this stunt and that stunt. So. It works on that level, but whereas something like, what did you just mention?
What
was the
Dark Knight?
The Dark Knight, yeah. Sorry, brain fart. I know that's weird.
No worries.
But whereas something like the Dark Knight, I'm sure the fight choreographers worked extensively, but the way the film was shot with like those like spinning shots, like behind pillars, kind of hiding the punches where I don't think they really needed to be hidden. But it's more to emphasize the character of Bruce Wayne, or more to emphasize the character of Batman and like the mystery and all that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, Judge Dredd comes up here, Judge Dredd comes up here for
the new one. I like Dredd. I like the new Dredd. But those are comic book adaptations. I mean,
yeah, and then Bad Boys 2. Is in here.
Yeah.
Bad Boys 2 goes hard.
Yeah.
I can't lie. It does go
I love
Bad
hard. Boys 2, yeah.
No, but the action goes hard in that movie.
Yeah. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes of just
pure craziness.
Didn't they spend like $20 million in the highway sequence?
That scene kills me.
Yeah.
It's so, and I've told you a million times, but even when we talked about it on the podcast and we had Makuga call in, I told him, I was like, bro, that highway scene is crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy highway scene. Yeah. I still think the highway scene in Winter Soldier is incredible too.
Yeah.
And the highway scene in Matrix Reloaded. Hey, that's a good one too. That's a good one right there.
I wish Winter Soldier didn't have the third act CGI too, because it does have the third act CGI. It does go into that, but
I mean, I still think like the highway fight in Winter Soldiers is one of the best action scenes I've seen.
The rooftop chase is pretty good.
The rooftop chase is so good. Like there's a lot in there, man. But let's kind of narrow it down. Give me your like 5 off the top of your head best action movies in the past 10 to 20 years.
Off my 5, I won't. This isn't like a ranking, so I don't want to put this.
No, it doesn't have to be ranked. Yeah.
But I will definitely say number 1 is Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, that's just one that I connect to personally on a lot of levels. Outside of the action, I think the story is great, the message is great, everything's great, acting is great. I'd also put Kill Bill Volume 1 in there.
Okay.
I really appreciate how many different levels it kind of. I mean, again, it's the conversation about cultural appropriation versus, actual, respect. I think Tarantino handles a lot of those elements with respect. I think he handles a lot of the cultures he appropriates with respect. And then I would probably definitely go with. I'm sorry. Those are 2, but if you want to jump in with something, then I'll come back.
I gotta go to them, man. And the 2 that are gonna be on my list are The Raid and The Raid 2. I really do feel like some of the stuff in those two movies are just some of the best action ever. Like I'm saying ever of all time when it comes to action movies and when it comes to martial arts movies.
Right.
Rewatching The Raid and The Raid 2, The Raid, just everything in the hallways, like the way it's shot.
Yeah.
Because there's one of them that's a oneer,
Yeah.
and it follows Iko, the actor's name is Iko, all the way down the hallway going through these bad guys, and then it spins around him and the bad guys, and then it spins right back to him going down the hallway. It's like this one continuous shot.
Yeah.
It's a throwback to Old Boy. We haven't mentioned Old Boy.
Well, I was gonna say that was gonna be my number 3. That was gonna be my
Old
number
Boy?
3. As I googled
The new
action
Old Boy?
No, the old Boy. Of
I
course
was gonna
not.
say.
But I mean, respect to Spike Lee, but that
old
one ain't
boy.
that one ain't it. That one ain't it.
Yeah.
But the old because I literally Google action movies 2000s, and the Old Boy came up like, oh, that obviously. So if you're picking the Raid, I mean, I'll pick the Raid, or Raid 1 or 2, but you're picking that, so I'll pick.
And the Raid 2, to me, the Raid 2, man, what you just said,
Oh, boy.
it goes from that prison fight mud scene, which is just bonkers, to that crazy, ridiculous car chase scene, which I think is underrated because the camera just flies around the cars in that movie.
They have if you've seen the behind the scenes videos for that, they had a cameraman who was
because I own the DVD.
Oh yeah. Did you see that part where they had the camera guys?
He's dressed as a car seat.
Yeah.
I saw him. Yeah. I saw him whenever we watched the movie last
crazy.
night. But then the final fight scenes are just some of the best fight scenes, choreography I have ever seen. And they're so brutal, bloody, gory, in your face kind of fight scenes.
Yeah.
And that kitchen fight to me is just still just absolutely beauty, like just pure gorgeous action. I love those.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, I said Old Boy, I said Mad Max, and I said Kill Bill Volume 1.
Yeah, I'll probably put Mad Max in mine. I keep looking up other ones. What do you put John Wick in these?
John Wick.
Yeah.
I personally put John Wick 2 as the one I like the most.
Yeah.
And I'd probably put that top 5. I mean, the franchise in general has great action. You know what? Actually, not. Actually, I'm not putting John Wick. I'm putting Atomic Blonde in there. Are you kidding me? I like Atomic Blonde way more than any John Wick movie.
That goes hard.
I love Atomic Blonde, man. Atomic Blonde is like, to me, that movie came out way ahead of its time. I think if that movie came out like a couple of years later, or if it came out in like 2020 or 2021 or whatever, I think that movie would be seen as like a classic, because I think it really is both a great spy movie and an incredible action movie. I mean, the whole long, I don't even, is it like 20 minutes? Is it like 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah.
When she goes to the whole building, she kills everybody in the building, she gets in the fucking car, she keeps driving, and it's still no cut until the car flips over. That to me is like mind blowing. That to me, so I probably put Atomic Blonde in my top. So I said 4 so far. Oh boy, Atomic Blonde, Kill Bill Volume 1.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, Mad Max for me is up there.
Yeah.
Ip Man to me just still goes hard.
Ip Man is good. Ip Man is great.
I love Casino Royale. I really do. I still think Winter Soldier is one of the best I've seen.
Yeah, Winter Soldier is great.
Of just that incredible scenes that keep going back and forth.
Yeah. And even though I think the style of the Bourne Ultimatum or the Bourne franchise,
the Bourne movies, huh?
Yeah, I think even though the style of those has had an overall negative impact on action cinema, because everybody thinks they could do the shaky cam shit. But I think the Bourne Ultimatum in and of itself is actually a really great action movie and a great spy movie. So I guess there's kind of a theme of like spy movies and and action movies kind of having this crossover.
Yeah.
But
and the ones I'm going to are like martial arts movies too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, martial arts, and they like you said, 300 has had an incredible impact on cinema today.
Yeah, action cinema.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon also came out in 2000, so I'd probably put that up there as well. You know what?
What?
I'm taking off, what did I say most recently?
I don't know.
I think I said Bourne Ultimatum most recently.
Oh, yeah.
Taking that off. I'm putting I think perhaps my personal, I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure, but it's definitely one that nobody looks at that I think is absolutely amazing, and that's Wanted. I'm putting Wanted.
Really?
I'm putting Wanted in my top 5. 2008.
Wanted goes hard. I can't lie. Wanted does go hard.
Wanted
you know
is
which
my
one?
shit.
It's one that came up here, and it's not one of the best ever, or anything special like that, but it's definitely one of my favorites of last year, and I think it made my top 10. It might have made my top 10. Upgrade. Upgrade was sick.
Upgrade is good.
That was a good action movie, man.
It's good.
It's so low budget too.
Yeah. to me, I think the action's amazing in that.
Yeah.
I think every other scene is almost unwatchable, but
Really?
the action is great. The action is great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really dug that movie, and it definitely is one of my favorites. But either way, man, there's a lot of good stuff, man. Mad Max, the Raid movies,
I think the most
Ong Bak goes hard.
I think the most important thing is these action movies have to have style. You know,
Yeah.
I think at least to me, because I love Wanted because it has a style.
That's true.
I love Mad Max Fury Road because it's a very different style. I love
300 has a style.
300 is very stylized. You know, and I think
John Wick is style. Yeah.
John Wick is all style, and I think when it's just like standard, you know, either a Bourne ripoff or another action ripoff like Mile 22 or whatever, when it's just something that just rips off like previous, especially like Bourne movies and like shaky cam movies or like Taken movies. I like the first Taken, but all of them kind of take from that like shaky cam type shit. When it's just like trying to be boring and doesn't really know what it's doing and doesn't have a style outside of like trying to be an action movie, then it ultimately falls in this place. And I think a lot of those movies don't do very well today, unless it's something, you know, I think of movies like Two Guns, right? Two Guns with Denzel and who's that? Ryan Reynolds.
Paula Patton.
Paul Patton was in that movie?
Yeah.
I think she is.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg, isn't it?
Mark Wahlberg. And then, but Denzel was also in that one with Ryan Reynolds. That was directed by your boy, wasn't he?
Who?
Denzel and Ryan Reynolds. I'm gonna look that up.
Oh, is it the new? What? No, not Denzel.
No, they were in. It came out Safe House. Safe House, and it was directed by Daniel Espinosa.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Back in 2012. But that one is a more gritty type of action movie. But yeah, I think overall, I think if an action movie has style and it's a good movie outside of the action, I think it's the keys to like being super successful. But it's tough to find that these days.
It is, yeah. Well, shout out to John Wick and giving it what it does.
John Wick, Atomic Blonde, absolutely.
Alrighty, guys, that was our podcast. Let us know in the comments down below, what is your favorite action movies of the past 10 to 20 years? What do you think of martial arts movies? Let us know all that stuff in the comments down below. For the Meaning Enough podcast, I am Ace.
Hey,
and we are peacing out. Peace out, guys.
Peace out.